welcome to our Beef Bonanza Upper Hunter Waverley sponsored education days. We're putting together some workshops, and this workshop today is conducted by myself, Bryce Whale, and Anika Whale is doing the photography and comments through the day. We're doing our workshop on breaking in. Breaking in is a very fundamental thing to get our base start of when we're showing our cattle, whether it be steers, heifers or bulls. It's really important to say that this is the way we do it, and it's not necessarily the right way, it's just the way we do it and it works for us. So I'm not saying the way anyone else does it is wrong, it's just different, and what works for you and your facilities is what's important. To start off with, we'd just like to go through a bit of the gear that we use. The first thing we start with is what we call our bagger. And basically all it is a bit of poly, a bit of PVC pipe with a bag or an old cloth on it. And we just use that to calm the cattle down, and basically we'll go through that under a demonstration shortly. But I think that's our main starting tool, and a great tool to come back to if you start to have any issues with kicking, etc. The next important thing that we like to use is a nice soft rope, probably a little bit longer than this, but with a nice big open ring at the end so as it can slide. And we basically use a neck rope on our cattle to start with, rather than putting a halter on and getting swollen jaws and having the cattle thrash about, and we'll show that through the demos. But a nice soft rope on your hands, but with a nice ring that can slide and release. When we get to a halter, I think it's really important that you have halters that actually have a ring to release. We got these made up with actually chain links so as that we never break them and bend them, and they're really good and they release nicely for the cattle. Those of you that don't have a release halter and just have a standard rope halter, all you have to do to convert it to a halter is pull your rope out, grab a D-shackle at any hardware store, Bunnings, etc. Whack that in, probably slightly bigger than this, and you'll get a bit bigger, but that was just what we had in hand in the workshop this morning. And you can just feed that back, and then you have a releasing halter. So then when you get to the show and you've got them broken in and you're happy to start going back, you can just take that back out and convert it back to a non-slip halter, which is probably more ideal for the show scenario, so that they don't work themselves out of a halter when they're tied up overnight or to a rail, etc. So that's just a quick, easy way to convert one to it. Okay? So today we're starting with just 3 young bull calves here. These calves are about 7 months old, 6 or 7 months old, and weighing about 300 kilos. So it's pretty a typical sort of start weight for a lot of steers, or a little bit heavier than some of the steers you'd be breaking in, but it's typical of what we do. We have broken in 6 and 7 year old cows by this same method, and got them to shows too. So it does work on all ages and weights. It's just a matter of patience, and I think all breaking relates to patience. So these cattle haven't been handled before, they're still actually on their mums, and we've just run them in today. So this is starting from scratch. So all we start doing is you might have a couple in the yard here, and we just start bagging them. I'll start moving off a bit because they're a bit nervous. This yard's probably slightly bigger than what we would normally use, but this is the property that the cattle were on today. A nice way to start these cattle often, so already starting to accept that after less than a minute. Okay. We start with a group of cattle because if you've got a real nervous one, he can tend to hide at the back, and you can start working on your quieter steers first, and he'll just hide at the back, and you'll get to him eventually, and you've got to concentrate on him a bit. I'm concentrating on that one first a little bit, just because he's at the front. Okay. If you've got a real quiet, you've got already some broken in cattle, it's really good to just have a broken in one in the yard the first time, just to keep them calm, because he's used to this. He'll tolerate this because that steer was kicking at that, I tend to concentrate on continuing there a bit, because if we've got a reason for him to kick, he's kicking at that, and then if it gets him used to things being slapped around his legs, and then for when you go to somebody slap something around his legs over the years, rope something, he's more immune to it and is not likely to kick at a later date. So we try and get rid of as much dirt and crap out of the cattle as we can in this broking stage. He's back to this first calf that we were starting, and already he's quite tolerant now, starting to settle to that. This calf's a little bit more nervous. He's moving away, so we'll just leave him for a bit. We'll concentrate on this fella.
So when you're hitting, you don't actually have to hit them hard. It's not how hard you hit them. It's just getting them used to basically being desensitized in every location of their body. So their legs, their head, their flank, anywhere that you can get to them and slap them gently with the bag is beneficial. And we've found that this method highly reduces kicking. And I know a lot of schools do have issues with animals kicking, and this is, I think, the #1 method of getting that out of them early. So here we are now 8 minutes into the bagging process, and we've got the first guy here that's very tolerant, doesn't really move, doesn't care where you hit him. This guy's still a little bit nervous, still walks around the yard, isn't really happy to stand there. He doesn't kick at it anymore, but he's still not happy.
And that's where breaking's important, that you actually take your time and treat everyone as an individual. You can't just have a golden rule for 20 minutes of this and 20 minutes of that. You've got to work on the animal. And if this animal needs an hour of bagging, he needs an hour of bagging to calm him down. Okay, and you can do that over a few periods. You don't have to do it all in one day. This can just be a slow process. And this is the third calf.
And he's a bit in between, so he is fairly tolerant of it now and is happy to mostly stand there. Isn't running around the yard, but isn't quite as quiet as the first fella.
See what I mean about he's trapped in now behind one? So if you've got a quiet one, you can work on the second one next to your quiet one. And that's where the old broken in one really helps to make this job a lot easier. So now we've just got this calf settled. We're still probably just 20 minutes into this process. We've been working on all three. This fella's the quieter fella, so we'll just sort of probably use him now as the demo fella so that we can keep moving. Okay, so once we've been bagging, he's quite desensitized to the bag, we starting to put a bit of a brush on him. I like to be able to nearly brush both sides right up to the shoulder before we even think about putting a rope on them. If he starts to move too much, you just go back to your bag and they tend to stop, get desensitized to that, and then you just go back in and Start getting the brush on them. They'll eventually like the brush. Do around the tail. They love getting brushed around the tail and scratched, so that's a nice spot. Try and find the spot that they like. When you start brushing, I think it's really important that you try and concentrate on using this hand on the near side so that you're facing the rear. And that's because if he kicks with that hind leg and gets you, when he kicks back with all his pressure, your leg will give and therefore you're less likely to break. You might get a bruise on the back of your leg, but you're not going to break your leg. So it's important when you're working on this side that you face the rear. And when you get on the other side, you swap hands and use your brush in the other hand. We haven't brushed him on this side yet, so we've got to get him used to the other side. Okay, we've been brushing this calf now and been working on him from the start to this point for about half an hour. So he's quite settled now with the brush pretty well. He's standing most of the time. We can get on both sides and brush. I should be using this hand, shouldn't I? But I'm not that overly concerned about kick of this calf. He's lovely to handle, and we've got along quite well. An odd calf won't completely stand for you to brush, and if that happens, you just move on and sort of go to the next stage. Okay, so we'll probably put the other two calves in the yard close so he's got a mate, and we'll just start to put this calf on a rope in a sec.
So this is the next step in the process, but just going back on the brushing and bagging process, don't be afraid to continue that process even for a week. You know, different schools obviously have different amount of lessons that you can work with the cattle in, and it's good if you can just build a relationship with the animal and they trust you for you to come in, and you'll find that the second day you go to bag them, they'll stand nearly straight away, or if you go to brush them, they'll often stand there, and it's not going to hurt to just continue that process even if they are going really well for a number of days. The only reason we're moving on today is obviously because we're trying to show you each of the steps. So we've been concentrating on this one bull calf, but normally, yeah, don't be afraid to spend more time on each step, and that way you really build that relationship with the animal. So here we've just moved on to the rope, so just been bagging him with the rope. Okay.
Just didn't get that first time. Yep. Oh. Okay. Oh. So the reason we've gone to this, oh, this calf's suddenly alive. The reason we've gone to this instead of tying them straight up to the rail or in the crush or in the race is that we prevent that flip over and all those big pulls, because I can release and it's releasing on him. So he's fighting a bit of the pressure already. He's starting to, but I can let go at any time and take the pressure off and release it. Okay, so instead of him getting a sore jaw, instead of him banging up against a rail or flipping over, I can just start to put a little bit of pressure on and get him to start responding and releasing.
Okay, so when you first put it on, they'll obviously react a little bit like this guy did. Don't necessarily put any pressure on, just let them get used to that feel around their neck first, and then once they've sort of settled a little bit, that's when you start to apply the little bits of pressure. And remember, every pull has to have a release. Okay, so the whole pull release, the same process works on the neck as the head. Every time you pull, you must release it to take that pressure back off.
Okay, even though now you've got the rope on, you can just go back to the bag, and it just allows you to come in on the animal a little bit more. He's used to the bag, so it allows you to come in. It gets used to it. You can come in, scratch him, that sort of thing. Okay? We're not actually, you know, we're just trying to get respect to the rope. As soon as I pulled that, he actually stopped and responded really well already. Okay? Now you've got a bit on, you can actually, you're sort of holding him a little bit. Good boy. Good boy. Good boy. It's really important that you work both sides of your cattle. Don't get them just near side where you often are. You need to work on both sides of the cattle. When you're going to work on them, clip them, prepare them, you're working on both sides. And judges are on the other side various times, so you need to be conscious of having your animals working both sides all the time.
Also, when you go to pull on them, it's obviously you pulling straight on is very difficult, so you try and pull them off balance so that they do have to actually move or take a step when you apply that pressure, so they get used to every time that pressure's applied, I have to take 2 steps, and then once it's released, I get to stand still.
Okay, so we're just sort of slowly working him there in a circle, and he's getting him to respond. He's starting to already follow me a bit. Okay. Okay, we've been working this fellow around on the rope for a little while now, and we've just sort of, now we're to the point where we can sort of nearly hold him to where we want while we work on him. Okay, I don't like to just go too calmly with the calves. I like to actually be a bit aggressive so as that when that student jumps in that's a little bit quick and fast, that they sort of can prepare for it. So I like to pat the cattle around their head, get them used to things, rather than to be just really super quiet and calm. While they're in this dopey stage, you've got the ability to do a little bit extra to them and get all those problems out. So I like to do this, especially around the head, because you're going to have to work around the head a lot, putting halters on and off at shows, brushing, clipping. So if they're desensitized around the head, just like everything else, it really makes the job so much easier. Okay, I think this calf's now ready to go to the rail. Okay, so I've just extended this rope a little bit just so I've got a little bit more room. So since I'm on my own, I can push him around the yards and actually do something with him. So, like I said, he's now working both ways pretty well off the rope, like that. Okay, so we're over this side, so I'll just whack it around the post here. See if we can just pull him into this line. The ability of the long rope is that I can just walk past him. Oops, I'm going to have a bit of a tug. Now this is the first time we're sort of getting the fly up. Now if he really does something silly, I can release this pressure and he can get off. Okay? I do advise when you're working with a neck rope, you can choke them down, so it's important that you don't leave the cattle and somebody's at the yards with them when you start tying them up with a neck rope on. Okay? But again, we've had the ability then to just release him without him get damaged or smacking against the rail. We're up to another spot here, or just pull him up again and just see what happens on this time. Okay. Okay. Good boy. Okay. Good boy.
So if they are standing there, you release the pressure a little bit just to, as a reward.
So again, we've nearly got him tied to the rail. He's letting us come in, scratch him, give him a pat. Okay, and then we can just move on to another rail, pull him up in a different spot.
So just reiterating, this isn't a one-day process. This is something that you need to do over a time period, and the more time that you spend at the start with bagging and brushing and just pulling around the yard before you even get to pulling into the rail, the better off and more accepting that they will be at each step. So now we've got this guy tied up to the rail. You don't want to leave too much length that allows them to be able to get their head down and flip around. But you also want to be able to leave enough length that he can release that. So he doesn't actually have any pressure there at the moment on his head, and you want to be able to come in and brush him or give him a scratch while he's tied up there, and he's pretty accepting of that. Okay. Some animals, from experience, some animals can take a lot longer to get to this process. This year I had one heifer that we spent 2 weeks bagging, and another heifer that took all of 2 days, and she was all but broken in. So there's a huge difference between individual animals, and just like at the start of this video we saw one bull take a lot longer to be settled than what it did this guy, who's been very accepting over the last 40 minutes during this 40 minutes to an hour over this process. So every animal is going to be completely different, so don't treat them the same. Some you have to spend extra time, and the ones that you do actually spend that extra time, especially at the start with, will be rewarded at the end for sure.
Okay, we've been on this fella now for about an hour and a bit. He's been very accepting. We've pulled him into the rail, we've worked him around the ring. He's had a fair bit thrown at him in the last hour. I'm delighted with where we've got him and that sort of thing. But you don't get all of the cattle like that in an hour, believe me. It's a slow process. Take your time, no rush it, spread it over a few periods at school. And like Anika said, it's the fundamentals. Just keep doing the basics, keep them calm, and the next step comes easier for each of them. And the longer you take with your basics, it makes it simpler at the end. Okay, if anyone has any questions, please don't hesitate to contact me. Speak to me at shows. I'm always happy to help kids that are keen and going forward in the industry. The beef industry is a wonderful place to be, and we need as many young people in it as we can. So all the best, and I hope to see you all at Beef Bonanza in 2021.